Politics reporter for the Nevada Independent, Megan Messerly, and editor of the Nevada Independent and MSNBC political analyst, John Ralston, who, of course, will be co-hosting Wednesday's Democratic debate. So, John, some of the headlines haven't been great, frankly, including the Washington Post reporting that campaign officials and Democratic officials are alarmed that the debacle that happened in Iowa may repeat in Nevada. What are you seeing and hearing? Because when you and I talked, I think it was just Thursday or Friday, and I asked you point blank, is Nevada going to be able to avoid what happened in Iowa? You wouldn't commit to that.
I remain in the uncommitted category, Chris. I have to tell you, what Garrett is picking up there about the long lines is certainly true. And there were long lines on Saturday and Sunday and today. And people are getting frustrated. But many people are waiting in line for 2 hours and then reporting to us or on social media that it was worth the wait. They interacted with people in line. Listen, the Democratic Party clearly did not anticipate the kind of turnout that is occurring. 18,500 on the first day, probably about half as many yesterday, I'd have to guess. But that's different than having things happen that could call the results into question, right? And that's what the Democratic Party is worried about. Those long-distance pieces from Politico and the Washington Post, of course the campaigns are worried. They should be. But, Chris, one thing real quickly is some of those campaigns want to create the perception that it's going to be a disaster just in case they don't do well, so then they can cast doubt on the results.
Oh, John Ralston suggesting that maybe they're trying to replay this. So,
that's
Megan,
a terrible thing to say, I know.
Horrible and shocking. You went to an early voting location on Saturday, I know, Megan, where you saw some voters waiting for hours. I wonder sort of what the mood was there. Did you see most people feeling positively willing to wait? Give us your sense of it.
Yeah, so I was at early voting sites both Saturday and Sunday. I talked to people who'd been waiting in line 3.5, 4 hours. The sense I got, though, is obviously it wasn't the way they expected to spend their weekend, but they were more than happy to do it. They made friends with their neighbors in line. We're talking about the political process. One woman I talked to yesterday at the Centennial YMCA voting site told me that she would have waited 12 hours to participate in the process. That's how important she felt it was. So I think we are seeing that frustration that the process is not going faster, but we haven't seen huge problems. It's just long lines and a long wait for a lot of folks.
John, the strength of Bernie Sanders in Nevada, turning out huge crowds there as he has pretty much everywhere he goes, leading in recent polls, adding to the angst from a lot of establishment Democrats who, as you well know, believe only a moderate can take on Donald Trump. But do you agree with the assessment that this is now a race for second and third place?
You know, I don't want to get uncommitted again on you, Chris, but I have to tell you that there was a poll done. It was a relatively small sample that showed Bernie Sanders ahead, and then everyone bunched around in the mid to low teens. Listen, I think Bernie Sanders is the favorite here because he has the best field operation and most people on the ground, and because he has so much momentum from New Hampshire and Iowa. But there is a really vehement, fervent effort here to try to get Joe Biden up into the top tier and maybe win the state. He does not have the infrastructure that Bernie Sanders or even Elizabeth Warren or Mayor Pete have, so I think it's very difficult. But listen, if Bernie Sanders loses here, and how often have we said this in 2016? It's an upset if he loses here. He's the favorite, and if he wins here, I think it's a real problem for Joe Biden going into South Carolina.
Yeah, Megan, I'm not coming there until the weekend, but when I was in New Hampshire, one of the striking things, and it turned out to be true from the exit polls, was how difficult it was for people to make up their minds because they were torn sometimes between who they liked most, who they thought could beat Donald Trump. They were influenced by the debates. I wonder, as you were talking to voters about candidates, was there a big takeaway for you?
Yeah, I think this race still is a muddle for a lot of folks, and talking to voters, they're definitely feeling that way as well. I was talking to a woman yesterday who told me that she decided to vote with her head, and for her that meant choosing someone she thought would be electable in the general election, so she decided to vote for Joe Biden. She said if she had voted for her heart, it would have been Elizabeth Warren. So we are seeing voters take that into consideration as they decide to cast their votes. But even talking to folks that are deciding between the more moderate candidates in the race, they're still making up their minds. I've talked to people who like Pete Buttigieg, but they like Joe Biden. They saw how Amy Klobuchar did in Iowa and New Hampshire, and they're giving her a second look, too. So I think a lot of folks are still in the process of making up their minds, even as they're waiting in line to early vote.
Yeah, that was kind of the message in an op-ed in the New York Times, John, and at least sort of a big picture of this. I'm guessing you know this guy, Harry Reid's former deputy chief of staff, guy named Adam Gentleson. Here's part of what he wrote. The Democratic presidential primary is starting to feel less like a political contest and more like an existential experiment. In the era of big data and after a year of microanalyzing every little twist and turn, we seem to know less than we did at the beginning. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do know Adam very well, and Adam is all over social media trying to pump up Elizabeth Warren, and has been for some time. And I'm sure he's frustrated that Elizabeth Warren, it's kind of strange, right, Chris? A few months ago, people were saying Elizabeth Warren was surging. She was one of the favorites for the nomination. Then she didn't show very well in the first two contests. But I do think it behooves us in the media not to jump to conclusions about what's going to happen here. Yes, I believe Bernie Sanders is the favorite, but it is a caucus. They've never done what they've done before. It's almost impossible to predict what the turnout is going to be, because we don't know whether all of this high turnout in early voting, which is a much simpler method for people, right, to just go in and vote, than a caucus. Is it cannibalizing what's going to happen on Saturday, or is it going to enhance it? I hear.
Well, I mean, that's the key question, right, John? I mean, what are the chances Nevada actually gives us any clarity?
It may not give clarity, but we have been known to change the direction of races. You remember in 2008 when Hillary Clinton won in New Hampshire and then came to Nevada, and that they made an all-out effort. The Culinary Union, which we've talked about, endorsed Barack Obama, and then Hillary Clinton eked out a win here. But then it became clear that Obama had won the delegate battle, and so he regained the momentum for that reason. And in 2016, Bernie Sanders had huge momentum coming out of New Hampshire. The Hillary Clinton had a 25-point lead here. Chris, she barely hung on, won by 5 or 6 points, and Sanders' momentum was blunted. Here you have a situation, and I wouldn't have predicted this 4 years ago, where Bernie Sanders has a chance, and a very good chance here, to continue momentum from the first two states. And that's going to be, as I said, a serious problem, not just for Joe Biden, but for some of the other candidates as you go into South Carolina and Super Tuesday.
But one big thing is happening, Megan, between now and Saturday, and that is the debate. And I wonder if you have a sense of what those undecided, sort of foggy voters are looking for out of that Wednesday.
Yeah, I've talked to folks who are telling me, you know, they're spending the week going to different candidate events. They're hoping to get a sense of what the candidates are like in person. But I think they are looking for that final compare-contrast, especially for the folks that are deciding to wait until Saturday to cast their votes. They're not voting early. They want to have all the facts in front of them before they make that decision. I think folks are looking for electability. They want to see a strong candidate on the debate stage, someone who can go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump in the general election. I think the debate will have a significant impact on folks that are deciding to wait until the actual day of the caucus to vote.
Yeah, and just ask Amy Klobuchar, because that certainly made a big difference for her. So, John, I'll put you a little bit in the hot seat, since you're the one who's going to, at least one of the folks who are going to be asking the questions. And a lot of people, I don't think, have an understanding of how much time, how many conversations are had about, you know, what questions to ask, who to ask them to, what order to put them in. But it does feel, I mean, these debates can always be really important, but it does feel in this sort of unsettled field like there is so much at stake. What do you, as a moderator, hope people are able to take away from the debate?
How important Nevada is? I'm kidding, Chris.
We already knew that, John.
Okay, thanks for that. That's what I was looking for, reaffirmation. Here's the thing, Chris, and you are absolutely right in how you describe these debates, and often the formats are very restrictive, and often they don't end up being real debates. But here are two things happening, I think. First of all, you have the tension being ratcheted up between among all these candidates after what's happened in the first two states, and you have the potential, we don't know for sure sure yet, and I just came from a meeting about the debate. No one knows for sure whether Mike Bloomberg shows up, which is going to add a completely other dimension to that debate.
John, if he makes the debate, what do you think the chances are he doesn't show?
You know, I was thinking about that myself, Chris. I'm not 100% sure that he's going to show up, even if he qualifies for the debate. But you can tell,
it's
just
such
Megan knows this.
It's a crazy year. Come on.
Megan knows this. It's as if he's already going to be here. She's reported, and others of my staff have reported, Bernie Sanders is spending a lot of time in Nevada, where Bloomberg is not even on the ballot, going after Bloomberg. Bernie Sanders would love to have Mike Bloomberg on that stage as a contrast. Do Bloomberg's people tell him to come and do the debate? I just think there's going to be more tension there than we've ever seen, and I hope we see more actual debating between the candidates, among the candidates, on issues that people care about, Chris.
Well, I would just say if he makes the stage and decides not to go, I would love to hear that explanation and see how it plays. That would be, I think, unprecedented. I can't imagine that it's not. John Ralston, Megan Messerly, I'll see you guys over the weekend, but there's a lot to happen between now and then. And remember to watch the next Democratic debate this Wednesday, 9 p.m. on MSNBC and NBC News. It has the potential to be epic. And coming up,